And we're live with Mike McRoberts. Mike, good morning.
Kia ora.
Thank you for joining us. Really appreciate you giving us a bit of your time, being an essential worker that you are.
Yes, it's nice, isn't it, to be called essential? And I've got to say, since before the lockdown, it's felt a bit like that. We're certainly being used as an essential service with the number of public broadcasts we're doing with the daily press conferences and that kind of thing. So yeah, it's a strange time, as we all know, and even stranger when you're working in it. I do enjoy the fact that I'm working in it because I think that helps the time go by. Because
Yeah.
otherwise, you'd be bored shitless, wouldn't you?
Yeah, I think people are feeling that a bit as well. Some of us have gotten busier, which is a very strange irony. But I think a lot of people are sitting around twiddling their thumbs. We've been joking that they talk about Christchurch being the garden city, but it feels like perhaps after this 4 week, New Zealand will be the garden country because everyone's down. All the weeds are gone in New Zealand. All the lawns are mowed. All those jobs are done, and so we're beautifying New Zealand one section at a time. I think at the moment.
I know, it's fantastic. And I think we're also going to see the emergence after lockdown of two types of people: those who haven't trained and maybe have got into baking over the 4 weeks,
Yep.
and those who have got out and done a bit of fitness, possibly for the first time in a while. So I think the physios are going to be well and truly overstocked when it comes to that.
I think it's going to be. One of the things we've been talking about with the series of Welcome to My Bedroom podcasts, and just so you know as well, I don't run a porn site or anything. I put those neons up specifically for something interesting in the background for this. There's not a regular feature over my headboard. Is the other alternatives, like what I've been thinking as well, is as I pick up my phone as it buzzes, is I've been wiping down my phone when I've gotten back from being outside. And a couple of times when I wiped it down, I've had like an antibacterial wipe. They've got those little holes at the end there. I wonder how many people are going to ruin their electronics during this period because they're viciously wiping down keyboards and stuff with antibacterial wipes. And, I think about cars. How many cars are going to have flat batteries when we come out of it? And so there could be a bunch of little jobs for various companies when we come out from things we've either inadvertently stuffed up because of lockdown or that we've not paid attention to because of lockdown.
Yeah, I got a new car, or a couple of weeks before lockdown, but even in the weeks before lockdown, I wasn't really traveling, and it's a hybrid, and I've still got a quarter of a tank of gas left, and it's like 6 weeks, so I haven't been to a petrol station yet.
Yeah,
So that's a win.
I did a similar thing. I was talking to my sister in Auckland, I think on the Wednesday of lockdown, and she went, "Oh, I'm going to go get a tank of gas just for safety." And she goes, "Oh, bugger, there's 40 cars backed up." And I went, "Oh, that's probably quite a good idea." So, and I say this with affection, sleepy old Dunedin. I thought, yeah, maybe I've got half a tank, but you never know. So I head myself along there, and I pulled into my local petrol station with 8 pumps, and there was one car in the forecourt. And so I just pull up and fill up, and thought, well, while I'm here, I've got my 20-litre petrol thing in the back for the lawnmower and for my tools at home, so I'll fill that up as well. And yeah, I've driven about 10 k's total, so I've got a lot of excessive fuel at the moment. I've got more than a whole tank, so I guess I get what you're saying.
Yeah, all that panic buying. Do you think people are going to be left with, rooms full of toilet paper at the end of
I
lockdown?
never understood the toilet paper. Like, I can understand food. People buying tons of spaghetti because it'll stay in the cupboard for a long time. But I never understood the toilet paper. I don't know. In fact, I was talking to, who was I talking to? It might have been someone who worked at Pack and Save. I don't know when, because or maybe it was the day before, because I haven't been to the supermarket in this time period. And I went, what was it with the impulse buys on toilet paper? Yeah, it was a Pack and Save before we locked down. And she said, oh, we didn't have time to put it out. If they had have just looked up, they would have seen that there was, Pack and Save has those storage on top. There was reams of toilet paper up there. And we both thought, both me and this lady I was speaking to at Pack and Save, that was a good philosophy for the next 4 weeks. Just look up. Just look up and take a breath, and you'll probably see the answer you're looking for.
Well, you've done well not to go to a supermarket. Actually, I've got to say, I'm the same. I haven't been into a supermarket yet either. My son has, which has been very, very good, just to pick up some essentials. But generally speaking, for day-to-day stuff, I've gone to the superette, the local superette,
Right.
which has been fantastic. Although I bought some tofu the other day and it was $13. I thought, wow. The tofu, really?
I haven't. I'm one of those people that has a bit of an overflow normally anyway. So if I go there and spaghetti's on special, or baked beans are on special, or toilet paper's on special, or whatever, I won't just buy what I need for that week. I'll buy 3 lots and I'll chuck them in my overflow cupboard. So I've always sort of had that. The day before the lockdown, I just went and got a few more things. A few more. Nothing serious, but a few more pasta sauces and a little bit more pasta and just some bits and pieces. We've got I use a local fruit and veggie store in Dunedin who delivers. So I have obviously had to restock fresh fruit and veggie, and we've got a dairy just down the corner, and I went in there the other day and just got some bread. But other than that, yeah, we're still rocking along with. Probably the truth is going through a little bit of those frozen minces in the freezer that have actually been there for 6 months. Not that we picked up for this, because you see it on special and you get another one, then you realise there's already 3 trays in the freezer. So no, it's been going quite good. I realised that I don't think I've spoken to someone who is sort of working their quote unquote normal job at the moment during this, and I wondered if you'd tell us a bit what your day is like at the moment, and how has it changed from, I don't want to say pre-COVID, because pre-COVID it was a bit weird as well, but let's say 6 months ago. What are you doing now any different, and how's it affecting your job every night live at 6:00?
Well, we are definitely practicing social distancing at work. So for me, how that looks is that I don't go in until mid-afternoon.
Right.
I do a lot of stuff from home. And when I do get in, my newsroom, or what used to be my newsroom, is now spread over 2 or 3 different floors in our building in Eden Terrace. Because most of the other staff, the sales staff, programming, all that kind of stuff, they're all working from home. So the only essential workers that need to be in the station at the time are pretty much there for news. So we're spread out over 2 or 3 different floors. It's quite eerie when you walk in, and you automatically are a lot quieter.
Yep.
My co-host Samantha Hayes, she's sitting a distance away from me when we actually present the news at 6:00. We're separate, so one of us is standing at the wall, the other one's at the desk, and that's kind of been a bit weird. Although if you're standing at the wall, it means you get to go home early because you leave before sport and weather, so you're surplus to requirements as soon as the sport starts. So that's kind of strange. At first, I felt like I wasn't contributing enough to the news, and then that quickly passed, and I was pleased to be home before the weather ended.
Yeah. Do you share that role? Like, do you do the desk one night and Sam does the wall and you vice versa sort of thing?
Yeah, we do. We alternate that. I'm not sure what's going to happen if we move out of lockdown, out of alert level 4, whether we'll go back to sitting at the desk together. I know across the road at TVNZ, they've done it a completely different way. They have complete separate teams, like a red team and a blue team.
Yeah.
And so that's for presenting, reporting, the whole works, which is amazing. In fact, I bumped into a TVNZ staff member when I was out for a run the other day, and he said, "Oh, you're not doing the whole split team thing?" I said, "No." I said, "Who the hell can do that?"
We don't.
Apart from you guys.
We don't have the public dollar to fall back on for that one. Yeah.
Yeah, and obviously, you look at what's happening with the media now, and it's well, I mean, there were tough times before, but now it feels not only are we covering the biggest story in the world, probably the biggest story of our lifetimes, but we're also fighting for survival as well. And that is incongruous when you think that we have the biggest audiences we've had in a long time too, because people are thirsty for knowledge about what's happening. But yes, I mean, we've obviously taken a 15% pay cut at MediaWorks. I see Stuff have just announced they're doing the same. There's been redundancies at NZME, Bow's, gone under. They're tough times.
Yeah, and I mean, it's interesting to see how the flow-on event kind of happens. But obviously, for you guys, it's a very big beast. Any kind of television station is a big beast, so not specifically you, but it's a big beast with a lot of moving parts and a lot of income needed to be generated to make that work. through advertising. But if you follow it all the way through, I'm here in Dunedin, I have a few small clients that I work on and with media and marketing, and 2 or 3 of them have gone, well, there's nothing to advertise at the moment because we can't do anything. So there's a half to a third of your sort of weekly business income disappearing, and it's interesting. And I guess it's like, I guess if you've got a lot of overheads, I'd consider you sort of a big domino, or whether you're a small domino, they still tip over the same. A small domino.
Yeah,
In fact,
absolutely.
I remember watching, I can't remember what it was, but it was like one of those, how do they do it programs, and they said, can we push over a 10-story building with this domino? And the thing is, it can push over something double its size. So like a 1-inch domino can push over a 2-inch domino, which can push over a 4-inch domino. And so in other words, through exponential growth, in theory, a 1-inch domino could get to pushing over something 10 stories tall. And it's a bit like that. One small thing falls over in this economy, and that has this flow-on effect and can eventually end up, harming I don't know how much TV3 costs to run, but hundreds of millions of dollars business through all lots of small dominoes.
Yeah, and it's been incredible, hasn't it, to see how many big businesses have been clearly operating on the breadline. You look at Burger King this week announcing that it had gone into receivership. I mean, these are big companies. In terms of media, I think anyone whose income is derived from advertising, you're a bit of a barometer of what's to come. Because obviously advertising's booked months and months in advance, and we saw that with the global financial crisis. We knew it was coming before it hit, and that's the scary thing at the moment. Our advertising's been cut by about half, and you'll see even the ad breaks are a lot shorter. But there's no end in sight with that. I mean, no one's ringing up to book more advertising, and I guess everyone's waiting to see what happens. But that flow-on effect, even when lockdown finishes, is going to be really interesting. We agreed as staff to a 15% pay cut for 3 months, but there was proviso that could go for another 3 months after that, and I'm picking that'll probably be the case.
Right.
Interesting, hasn't it, been the sort of discussions that I've seen on social media talking about mainstream media or traditional media going to the government and wanting a handout, and then you've got people saying, well, no, social media is where it's at and that kind of thing. It's really thrown that whole issue into the forefront of people's minds again. The thing I'd say to that, and I've held off going on Twitter and having a rant, but Facebook and Google don't provide the stories. They're not the ones in the press conferences who are pushing the Director General of Health to find out more information about the unknown cluster in Auckland, and they're not, Michael Morra, going on each night with some really good facts and great talent about the lack of PPE protective equipment for nurses in hospitals. And so that's the thing. I mean, we're not just providing a service in terms of putting those things to wear, but actually going further than that and doing journalism. And that's the thing that annoys me, is that those questions aren't being asked by Google and Facebook. The only questions they're asking the government at the moment is, how much do you want to spend? And I think that's where traditional media is getting quite pissed off at the moment, because there's a lot of money being spent on that by the government when it should be going into local pockets.
Yeah, and I agree. It's tough because I 100% agree with you, but it's also the world we live in. Like hearing Jacinda in the press conference yesterday say, she was asked that question directly, how much money are you putting into advertising on social media versus into traditional media? She said, well, we have to go where the people are. And I actually agree with that as well. And so how do we, I guess then the biggest question is, how do we protect, look after, ensure our journalists in our fourth estate in New Zealand, which is essential to a democracy, and also reach to the people where they are? I mean, is it that the fourth estate needs to move to where the people are? That would seem to make more sense. If you were a teacher and there was lots of kids in a certain part of town that needed teaching, so that's where the school was, you'd move to where the jobs were. Does the quote unquote traditional media, mainstream, whatever people want to call it, I don't think there is any traditional media anymore necessarily, How do they? What do we do? Do we force people to come to the media, or do we figure out how the media goes to them? And I think if we can figure that out, then everyone can stay together. It's a bit like I was talking to Anna Fifield the other day from the Washington Post. And I said to her, don't you get pissed off when everyone said newspapers are dead, yet every story on CNN or MSNBC tends to start with, it was reported in the Washington Post, or it was reported in the New York Times. It was like, you seem to feed all the big companies. And she basically said for them, it's cyclical. So they'll see a story on CNN and then they'll report on it and, accredit them, and it's vice versa. So they've figured out a way to sort of do it, I guess. I just wonder if we're in a stage where the media, whatever that means, needs to figure out how to play the cards they're dealt, as opposed to going, these cards are unfair.
Yeah, and that's the quandary we're in at the moment. I mean, Google and Facebook run our stories, but they don't pay for them. So and not just ours, but all New Zealand media stories. And that's the thing that other people don't realise, is that without those stories, there wouldn't be a news service or access to news on those social media platforms. So, I'm not sure what the answer is. I mean, this has been bashed around smarter minds than mine for a few years now. I get the feeling, though, that this could be a real crossroads for us if we don't sort something out now. In fact, I heard Mark Jennings yesterday saying that he thinks it's probably a year too late, which is
wow,
not great to hear. But
that's depressing.
Yeah, Mark was obviously a former news director of TV3. So
and his site is now Newsroom. Is that right?
Yes, that's right. Yeah. And you look at those businesses, Newsroom, Spin-Off. I mean, they're doing a fantastic job. And this is the issue. We need to encourage good journalism in this country. One thing we have seen, and I talked about our audiences being bigger than they have been for a long time, and that is that move back to a trusted source. And so, which is great when you're 54 and you've been in the business for 35 years. And that has been very helpful for us. And there's something to be said in that.
That idea of, I've used this example before, talking to people about evolving or disappearing with the media. And my mum used to talk about the Iceman. Like when she was a little kid in the 40s, the Iceman would turn up once a week and drop the block of ice into the safe. And that's how they kept their, fruit and veggies refrigerated. And of course, what did the Iceman do when the old refrigerators became available? And the answer is he either adapted or he disappeared. And that's really depressing to hear that we might be a year too late, if Jennings is saying that. But I wonder if we are a year too late, and this is probably the wrong question to ask you, but will TVNZ and the state broadcaster be the place that ends up being the source of journalism in New Zealand? Are they going to integrate with Radio New Zealand, and are they going to end up being a BBC type figure? In other words, then, as you've just said, money, I'm not saying they've said money doesn't matter, but they have more resource to be able to do things, and they're the ones left standing because they're the only ones that can afford it. Yeah,
well, I mean, I'd personally like to see that. I think, New Zealand has long needed a kind of an ABC or a BBC setup and approach. But we also need an independent voice as well. And I think if TVNZ, or at least TV1, was commercial free, it would free up the rest of the advertising. And I think TV3, Prime, Sky could probably live off the rest and provide that independent source of news too, which I think is crucial. I've worked for both companies. Worked for TVNZ for 6 years, and then in fact this week 19 years at TV3. So
nice. Congratulations.
Yeah. Celebrated very quietly. Particularly with what's going on at the moment in the media, but and they're quite distinct companies. The feeling within the newsroom and how we approach stories and how we do them, and the whole DNA of who we are is quite different, and I think we need that.
Do you think that the independents out there, and I mean, I'm thinking about Spin-Off, Newsroom, thinking about bloggers, I know that whale oil is no longer really a blog, but was for a long time. Kiwi blog, these big sources of opinion as opposed to news. On some level, even this sort of thing, podcast that I'm doing from a bedroom, maybe some of the, especially around the world. I mean, you look what happens with Joe Rogan. Joe Rogan sneezes and the world tries to find out what's going on with him at the moment. All the news headlines then follow him. But on some level, that is also contributing to the decline of perhaps revenue and or eyes on mainstream media as well. Because, if I can read a piece on David Farrah's blog site where he explains the news item that he's got from, let's just say, the New Zealand Herald, then I don't need to go to the New Zealand Herald. So they're sort of clipping that ticket as well, and perhaps also driving people away from having to go to the source. They go to the secondhand source where they get the nutshelled piece of news, but also opinion thrown in there at the same time.
Yeah, I kind of feel it's the other way, to be honest. I think we've seen a terrific increase in traffic and without the podcasts that we've done and stuff like that, and audio work that we're doing, and so that's running alongside the rest of our work, and people will see something or just want to know more or want to see the whole thing. Actually hear a conversation like we're having now.
Yep.
And listen to it and make their own minds up about stuff. And I see there's absolute merit in that as well. So I think the two can work side by side. The great thing that I guess, for people in television or in the more traditional media is that they bring with them when they go into that stuff a profile, and so, or a familiarity. And so you're not having to build that audience from scratch. You're bringing in people who already know you, but maybe want to know a bit more about you and how you operate, and then also the subjects and whatever you're talking about.
Yeah, and that's true. I mean, I think probably the best example of that New Zealand scene in the last 50 years is Holmesy. Everyone would see Holmes at 7 o'clock in the evening, and everyone felt comfortable with him, and they knew that they'd see him. Although in saying that as well, you've seen when he left TVNZ and went to Prime, wasn't it? His audience didn't follow him. So the loyalty to him was associated with the station he was on as well. So, you've been at, as you say, TV3 for 19 years. I was thinking maybe you could get some kind of single serve cake where no one touches each other's pieces and you just have one, I don't know. Is that...
Or a couple of dozen muffins.
yeah. And have them all wrapped separately and put separately.
I don't think we'll be doing that for a while because
true.
Last weekend, this lovely woman who works in our newsroom brought in something to share with the rest of the team, and we discovered she was sick, and so we've now got a few people in isolation because they're waiting to find out if they've got something.
Oh no!
So and look, she just wouldn't even thought that she was doing something wrong. It was Easter and she wanted to be kind, so it's tough. Right? Yeah.
So I was wondering as well the loyalty to the person and the loyalty to the brand. As a former radio announcer and that kind of stuff, there's always a little bit of arrogance and pride where you kind of leave a job where you've been pretty successful and you've built an audience and you've done well, and then you see the person who comes after you, just continue that on. Don't miss a step, just continue it on. The numbers stay, maybe they even get a bit better. And so I was thinking about that when you were talking about TV3 is a brand that a lot of people are loyal to. I mean, there's well publicized financial hardships from last year. Obviously what we're going through at the moment is going to be even harder. It feels like we're at a time now, and this might be literally, I feel like that maybe the media landscape will change in the space of 4 weeks like it should have done for the last 3 or 4 years. And we'll go, well, we have to do this now. We can't keep doing this the way we've always done it. And now is the time to say to those TV3 loyal fans, viewers, those people who that's their brand, you guys need to step up. Now, what that means, I don't know, whether it's paywalls, which have always been floated and only recently taken on board, whether it's the way you support us is to support our advertisers, some overt message, but the idea that being loyal to the brand, I think is the thing that we need the supporters to stump up for now. If you're loyal to the All Blacks and you want to watch them, you pay money. You either pay for a Sky subscription or you pay for a ticket. You know what I mean? And I wonder if that viewer listener based funding is going to have to be a portion of the way forward from now on. Because I had to listen a little bit to the media meeting yesterday with the government, and I'm sorry, but New Zealand On Air can't do it. They can't do it. You know, I mean, as much as I love spin-off TV shows that just throwing money at something can't lead to an outcome. There's got to be listener or viewer buy-in, and they have to have some skin in the game somehow, whether it's buying these products or whether it's, you know, dipping into their own pocket.
Yeah, I think you did right. And look, I hadn't actually thought of a television paywall scenario before, so yeah, that's very interesting. We are battling against, you know, obviously years of the barn door being open, aren't we?
Yep, absolutely.
and we've seen how difficult it's been for the Herald and for newspapers to do that. Although I'm a subscriber to the Herald Premium, I can't remember the last time I brought a physical edition of the paper. I used to love sitting down to read the paper, but now I'm just a premium subscriber, and it's not a lot, and I think it's fair enough. You know, and I want to be supporting local media. Same with Newsroom and the spin-off and the New York Times. So, but then, you know, I'm a news junkie too, so that's what I want to see. But you'd have to think probably within our core audience there'd be a percentage that might look at that.
Yeah, I think so. I think the way to do it, as you say, the barn doors open. That's a beautiful example. We talked about this the other day. It was like, you know, you went from having to pay for a ticket to go see the All Blacks to TVNZ having the rights and ownership, which means everyone got to see it for free, to going behind a paywall on Sky TV and having the world explode. What do you mean paying to see the All Blacks? You always have had to, because the only way you'd see them is to purchase a ticket at the gate. But I think that the way forward perhaps is premium content. You know, and I think that's what the Herald has done. You can go to the Herald and get some things, but there's extra things put on top, which you got to pay for. And before, when we were talking about the media needs to move to the people, I think, you know, groups like TV3, and you see it with RNZ heavily, although they're not necessarily commercial in the way we're talking about it, but moving, and Stuff does this very well, moving to the podcasts and actually going to where the people are. I mean, that Black Hands podcast from Stuff, I think, is singularly New Zealand's most successful ever podcast all over the world. I think I could be wrong with that. And yeah, maybe, I mean, a television station needs to have some premium content behind walls that is either so good that the viewer can't not buy it, or the flip side is so reasonably priced it doesn't put a big hole in your pocket. So I used the example the other day, and it's not a news source, but Disney Plus. When Disney Plus came out, it was $100 for the whole year, and I was like, well, that's $8 a month. That seems reasonable for my kids to have, you know, access to all these things for a whole year. I actually purchased the New York Times paywall. I went behind the paywall for that because I was doing with Professor Robert Patman. I was doing a podcast on Super Tuesday, and they had a special on, and it was $26 for the whole year. And I was like, yeah, that's just worth getting, you know.
Yeah.
So it's either finding content that, you know, and I'm not saying we can produce a Game of Thrones, but something that can't not be watched, or at a price point that can't not be walked away from. And that's, I think, what the media, and I think some of the paywalls in New Zealand, in my opinion, are too high, and they're causing people to walk away from them. Finding that balance is, I think, what we need to do.
Hopefully you're not getting too much noise at the moment. It's rubbish collection day here.
No.
It's still an essential service in Auckland, thank goodness.
You're sounding absolutely perfect, Mike. Yeah. But I mean, it's a changing time.
It is, and look, and with even within the 6 o'clock news show, we've turned far more into a curation service rather than you know, trying to just repeat what people have read all day, and so that's made things, you know, when we look to break a lot more stories. I mean, our focus is absolutely on breaking stories, and we've got some really good journalists who can do that. But yeah, that curation side of things too. And I often talk to people when they say, "Oh no, you know, I've been been on Staff or been on the Herald or even been on our own website all day, and I've seen all the news I want to see. But it's very self-driven, and it's the stuff you don't look at, which might be the best story of the day, that you aren't normally drawn to because it's in a show. And I find that too with some of the really good paywalls when you get into their premium service. The writing's fantastic, and so you're going to read about stuff that you wouldn't normally, and that's just good. It's real. It opens so much more up to you, and I'm really appreciative of that.
Yeah. I'm thinking also about what's happening offshore. I've been saying for the past year, since trying to launch this podcast actually properly, been saying for the last year that New Zealand hasn't quite caught up to what's happening around the world in the digital landscape. And you've got guys who are doing daily news shows who put out the first hour on YouTube or on whatever platform they've got, Vimeo, whatever, and then they put out the second hour behind the paywall. So they give a little bit of both, or then you look at the people like we talk about Joe Rogan, like the Joe Rogans of the world. They're so big that the advertisers come flooding to them. So they've found the audience and they can support it that way as well. I'm just interested in where to from here. I'm interested. It's a byproduct, but it's a really serious byproduct as to what the media world will look like coming out of this. Will there be more contractors and more independents, coming together and making up a source? The other thing is, I think obviously news and journalism is uber important, but if you're talking about a successful business model and a place of either paywall opportunities or advertising, is if you look around the world, the biggest shows in the world are all the opinion-based ones. So, disseminating the news with an opinion. So, and we don't really seem to have that in New Zealand now. Our 2 7 o'clock programs, and I like them both, but they've moved to more sort of, I don't want to be patronising and say infotainment. It's not fluffy because they talk about serious things, but it's certainly not that, not to hark back, but that Holmes of the 90s sort of thing, or that, I was trying to think of the guy from Australia who's on Sky News at 10 o'clock each night. Can't think of his name right now, but who really go, these are the issues, and this is my opinion on them. And they always seem to be the biggest rating shows on those stations.
Yeah, we probably get that more in breakfast than we do.
True.
At a peak time. And I'm just, I actually worked on the Holmes show for 3 years, and learned a hell of a lot from Paul Holmes. He was an incredibly generous man, and found it fascinating watching how he operated. I don't think we've ever seen another broadcaster like him. He just had that ability to, pull in both sides of the argument and also, deliver something with compassion, but also something with authority. And it was fantastic. On his game, he was amazing.
Yeah, he was. I had Jack Tame in the studio not too long ago. He was down here for a writers' festival, and we both talked about Paul because I had interactions with him around ZB, and the thing that I always found most endearing about him was actually how endearing he was. He was so lovely and nice, and I was a absolute nobody, bottom of the rung, last man on sort of thing. But he'd talk to me like he'd talk to Grumpy as producer, or, we were all important, and he'd actually pump me sometimes for information. And I always used to love that. So he'd be going down for a durry just before the show started, and I'd be going down to the elevator to leave. And he'd be like, Pat, what are they talking about? That's what he'd always say to me. So what are they talking about? Like, he wants to know the feel of the nation, what was going on. So what have they been talking about? And he wasn't doing it because he was being nice to the young guy with no profile and no nothing. He was doing it because he wanted to get that feel for where the nation was right at this moment. And I thought that was one of the things. You'd see him go into the dairy in Te Kuiti, and then all of a sudden all of Te Kuiti was turned out because Paul Holmes turned up, because he had that, I don't know, that magnetic personality, but also when he talked to you, you really felt like you were being talked to by maybe not an equal, because he's a sublime broadcaster, but equal in humanity. He didn't put himself above you. And I've worked with other broadcasters in similar roles, who, the bosses have to say to them, you do have to talk to the people who work around you, because if you don't talk to those people, then they won't actually give back to you what they want. And he was a special human being.
Yeah, he was. He was never patch protective, and maybe that's because he owned his patch so much. But
He had a big patch
yeah,
too.
that's something. That's something I learned from him, and it's really helped me, through the years. And there's been numerous, journalists that I've, had dealings with and helped with over the years too. And following the example that he showed me, I think the only time we ever had a crossword was we used to drive to Stories together, and he was playing his bloody CD, which was horrendous. But yeah, so 19 years ago, I left TVNZ, and it wasn't a great leaving because I had to go to the employment court to get out of my contract to go to TV3. But I just saw the opportunities there as being better, and so I did that. So I got no farewell, and I was on the Home show at the time. And I'd been there for 6 years. I'd read the news. I'd read with Judy. I'd done 3 years of current affairs on the Home show, and had cemented a reasonable place and a reasonable standing in the organisation. But Paul took the entire Holmes team and their partners out for dinner, off-site, and paid for everything for a farewell for me. That was on the Thursday night before Easter.
Wow.
And then on the Good Friday, the next day, I read the 6 o'clock news on TV3. Actually had to ring the receptionist and find out where the building was, driving there. And walked in and I thought, oh my God, what the hell have I done?
Wow.
But it's been fantastic ever since. And I started in radio too. You might know I was with RNZ for 11 years before I went to TVNZ. And the thing that I always loved about 3 and still love about 3 is it felt like radio.
Right.
In many respects, it was smaller, and it didn't feel like you were working for a government department. It felt like everyone had a job to do, and probably another couple of jobs as well. Which is what I'd been used to, and so that's and you're always encouraged to take the initiative and to take the responsibility. There was no safety net below you, and that's what I've lived with the last 19 years, and I've bloody enjoyed it.
Do you have any feeling, and I know we're kind of talking about the unknowns, but obviously conversation around MediaWorks, or TV3 in particular, not necessarily or so much the radio stations, about their future. Has there been active conversations about how the current situation has impacted that? Because at one stage they were saying, maybe we have to shut down TV3, maybe it's going to have to disappear. That was actually a public conversation last year. Are those conversations still happening? Or is it flipped over to, actually, we're so important at the moment because of this climate, we have to stay no matter what?
Well, yeah, I was in Japan for the Rugby World Cup when that news came out. In fact, I had a 5 o'clock in the morning conference call with CEO Michael Anderson about TV3 being placed into sale. It was a bit of a shock, but then kind of looking at it, and working out, where the company was going, I could see there were actually going to be opportunities there. And what transpired in a couple of months after that was that there was some genuine interest in buying it. I'm not sure where that process is now, obviously, right. with the way things have gone. It's probably taken a setback, but well before the end of the year, the whole, if we don't get a buy, we're going to shut down TV3 scenario was taken off the table.
Oh, cool.
That came as a huge relief. The thing that I noticed too is that no one rushed out the door, and there were offers for a couple of our reporters, and they stayed. And that's, you talk about loyalty before. That is loyalty, but it's also, knowing the opportunity that they've been given at 3 and will continue to get. And so I hope that that sale process does go through, or maybe it's that we're sold as a bundle again.
Right.
And I kind of like that idea. I think it's a multi-platform company. We bring a lot to the table. We've got radio and digital and television as well, and can look to other avenues too. We've also got QMS, which is the electronic billboard company. So I think there is a future there. It's just so hard. It was hard to predict before COVID-19. It's bloody near impossible now. Yeah.
Yeah, it's Yeah, it's a completely different world we live in. Hey, I was thinking as well, you're famous full stop, but you're sort of famous in the media world for, getting into war-torn areas, going to places that are either in current conflict or have been or about to be in current conflict in your vest and your helmet. I talked to a mate the other day and I kind of went, it feels like we're sort of in a war at this very second, yet rather than the soldiers being the ones facing bullets, it's the nurses and doctors who are facing, the most danger. Can you relate? Is there any, I know it's not the same sort of danger in the streets, but is there any sort of similar feeling that you get, especially in the reporting world, where this is a bit of a war zone at the moment that we're going through, only the enemy is unseen and really unbeatable other than by our own immune system?
Yeah, there are actually a lot of similarities. When you cover an earthquake or a tsunami or something like that, it's an event, and so what you're doing is you're actually looking after the aftermath of it. And each day, each increasing day, you're getting further and further away from what was the hot spot, if you like. But being in an active war zone is what this feels like.
Yeah.
Being in Gaza or Afghanistan or Iraq, because it's a daily thing. You wake up each day and you're not sure what's going to happen. It's that uncertainty. And I've got to say, with a war zone, though, it felt like there would be an end soon. You always felt, even in Gaza in 2014, you felt, given the number of civilian casualties, that there was going to be an end to it within, days or weeks. But this, I'm not so sure about. I don't know where the end is with this, and the repercussions of it could go on for a long, long time. The whole lockdown thing, I've been in lockdown probably half a dozen times around the world, maybe more.
Right.
One of the things, and I did a little video post on this a couple of weeks ago, is all the roads clear, and then for some unfathomable reason, people's driving tends to shit. They just become so familiar or so relaxed around the fact that there's no traffic on the road. They're going through red lights or not stopping at stop signs. I was driving down Ponsonby Road one night, and there was only me and another car on Ponsonby Road. It was coming towards me. I was going the other way. A pedestrian walked across the pedestrian crossing, and it was still daylight. It was pre-daylight saving finishing, so about 7 o'clock. And he almost ran the pedestrian over on a pedestrian crossing. Wow. And there's only, virtually 3 of us on the entire road. And so that's one thing. That's people start taking stupid risks with things because they're bored or they've become too familiar with danger. The danger here, of course, is interaction and touching things and getting too close, and so hopefully people stay the course, because the last thing we want to do, and there's been a lot written about this and talked about this, is come out of lockdown and then have to go back into it. I think that would be the death knell for so many businesses in this country. I've got a brother who's got his own signwriting business in Christchurch, and he's been marshalling everyone back into their homes, to make sure that this lockdown is it, because if it lasts much longer than that, he's toast, and which is tough. And I know there'll be a lot of small businesses around the country like that.
Well, yeah, I'd be interested to get your vibe on that. I think I read a piece by Barry Soper this morning when I was getting up, and I'd be interested to hear what you think the response has been thus far, because paraphrasing his piece, he was saying the government knows it went too far and we must come out of lockdown next week or else the economy's toast and the government's backpedaling, sort of thing. I might be paraphrasing it a little bit badly, but I definitely, one of his points was the government knows it went too far in the level 4. As a citizen, I kind of go, well, I am a citizen and a business owner, so I kind of have I have some other I have feet in or irons in other fires as well. I put a post on my Facebook page the other night where I said I'd be happy with another week, just to make sure this thing's gone. And I think Jacinda missed a trick the other day when she said, all those people who broke the rules over Easter, you could be responsible for another outbreak. I was like, people are selfish. Give it to them in a selfish manner. All those people who broke broke the rules over Easter, you could be responsible for another 4 weeks of you being locked down. That's the selling point from a marketing point of view. It's like, because I think people think of their own situation and they go, well, someone in Kaitaia gets sicker, that doesn't impact me, but you being locked down for another 4 weeks does. How do you think the government's handled this, and what do you think about this idea that some commentators out there at the moment are saying enough is enough, let's get back to it?
Look, I don't think they overstepped. I think, go to one of the families of someone who's died in the last couple of weeks and try and tell them that the New Zealand government overstepped their mark. Who knows what would have happened if we hadn't kept the restrictions as tight as we had. And I also see there's something in the New Zealand psyche, and this is the trick we've missed a little bit here. We've kind of touched on it a little bit with some of those press conferences, but as a nation, we love affirmation. We love being really good at something, or the world seeing us being really good at something. We've got a unique opportunity here to eradicate this thing, to wipe it out, or at least have absolute strict control over it that no other country can. And I think we push on and do that. And well, when I say push on, I mean do the 4 weeks. If we had to do another week, I'm with you. Let's do it just to make sure. But surely that's got to benefit us in the long run when you think about our image overseas and the whole clean green, obviously with Doc, being a place where you can come and be again. And I'm thinking now, I did the anniversary of the Christchurch shootings just the weekend before we went into lockdown. And I spoke to a widow of a woman who said, she was a refugee who came here from Syria, and they came here because New Zealand was the safest place in the world. And then that happened. But I think, again, we could market ourselves as being the safest place in the world because of how we look after people as well. And that's the other thing. It's, and by doing that, I think we'll attract the right people as well. So, to me, I think we've actually got a really good opportunity here as a nation to be at the top of the world.
Yeah, and I think if people haven't quite picked up on this, I just realised what I just did as well, by the way. I just took a news source that people need to pay for and gave the story out exactly what we've just been talking about. Exactly. So, I'm to blame, and I'm about to do it again. I saw a headline on CNN the other day, although it came to my phone, so other people can get it for free. And they talked about potentially social distancing until 2022, which is a likely time they expect a vaccine by. So I think some people haven't. I don't know. From reading my Facebook page, when I say we should stay in for an extra week, I don't think some people understand the potential longevity of this, and the upside from us squishing this. I talked about Anna Fifield before. It wasn't until I read her piece in the Washington Post that I actually realized, we're going to try and eradicate this from our country. And if we can do that, we can become this little self-contained, independent country where we're already, the grocery store for the world. So we don't grow bananas in New Zealand. I can do without a banana. I'm happy with my Central Otago peaches. That's fine. I'll go with those. And I think, once again, this comes back to, ironically, a conversation around loyalty. So then we need New Zealanders to get out there, and I've mentioned this a couple of times in these podcasts, and New Zealand needs to run a campaign which is, can't do France, do Whakatane. Can't do Queensland, do Queenstown. And then we become loyal to the country, and we become sort of like, how Texas always wants to pull away from the rest of America because it's got such a big economy of its own. We sort of become our own little, literally and metaphorically, island in the sea where we can perhaps operate a bit differently than the rest of the world. Perhaps, maybe.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, and I love the idea for Air New Zealand. I think that's great. And potentially we can see overseas tourists coming in, so long as they're tested and proven to be healthy and that kind of thing, to walk our beautiful tracks and, to see our scenery and to go to our cities and relax and know that they're not going to get sick.
Yep.
I think potentially that's a huge boost. People will pay good money for that, and so I think that's great. And I can see over time, obviously our borders with Australia will become a little more freer. Geez, I worry about the States though. I was meant to be going to the US later this year for the election and also running the marathon in New York, and I'm concerned that neither of those things are going to happen.
Oh my goodness. Could you imagine if the election didn't happen? I mean, there are a bunch of left-wing commentators who are already have been saying for 2 years, if Trump gets beaten, he's not leaving anyway. Imagine if there was actually no election and so he wasn't leaving anyway. If they said we're going to delay it by 12 months, it's unfathomable. I was actually going to ask you a question about something that happened with Trump the other day. I realized how I sometimes listen. Well, I don't sit there and listen back to my old tapes, but occasionally I come across a piece of audio and I go, "Oh, what's this?" And I click on it, and it's a talkback call that I've saved for some reason, and I cringe and I go, "You arrogant 32-year-old shit, talking to this 60-year-old woman like this. What an absolute tosser you were." And I realized again, I just don't have the mentality for it. When I think he was talking to a incredibly respected journalist from the ABC, and Trump said from the podium, "Well, you're a third-rate reporter." And I don't understand how someone has the calmness in there to kind of go, "Yeah, but that's okay because you're a fourth-rate president." Just to not actually say that, because everything inside me would be kind of coming up wanting to bite back, and obviously that would be a terrible thing to do because you'd lose your spot in the briefing room and stuff, but. Yeah, it's a very interesting time, and those people who are reporting Trump are very special people, and I am really enjoying the fact that places like CNN have stopped taking those press conferences live, and they're taking out the salient bits, and then they're saying, "This is not true. This is true. This is what we're saying. This is what like the other day when he said, 'I have absolute power.' Who the fuck does he think he is? I have absolute power." King Trump.
Which you then had to reverse about an hour later. Yeah.
Yeah, but so people who haven't seen it, I mean, obviously in America they have 3 steps of government, and for example, it's Congress that gets to decide if there's a war. So he doesn't have absolute power. And then the next day he came back and he said, "I've given the authority to the governors to run their states as they see fit," which is their job. So he doesn't have the ability to give that anyway. So I find it difficult because
it's like watching a long-running version of The Office, except The Office is the presidency of the United States. And don't you feel for the New York governor Cuomo? Is just he just looks like a broken man every time he gets up on the podium to announce yet another increased death toll. It's shocking what's going on there. And again, another reason to be incredibly thankful for the fact that we live where we live.
Yeah, it's the idea before about opening up the borders and stuff. Look, maybe you know this because I've had this conversation 2 or 3 times with 2 or 3 people. If people come into our country, whoever, New Zealanders or whatever, visitors, and they go into the 2-week lockdown, is that because there might be a few days before they show signs that they've got COVID? Because my question was, why aren't they just testing at the border? I mean, obviously, you can test at the border. You can basically go into a hotel room for a day, get the results back. The only logical thing I can think of, this is an Occam's razor thing, is maybe if you've got COVID on day 1 and they test you on day 1, can you give a false negative because it's not going to show until day 4 or day 5? Is that if you've got it but not showing signs, do you have any idea, being surrounded by news at the moment, why we're not just testing at the border and then releasing people?
The only thing I can think of, and we're not just testing at the border, that's the thing. The people we're testing are those who are showing symptoms. I mean, there's obviously a call to test everybody, and I think in the future, they should be tested before they leave the country departing from, and then again when they get here. I mean, to me that makes absolute sense. So it's only people who have symptoms that are being tested, and then the rest are all going into quarantine now, and if those symptoms come through, it'll be within that 2 weeks.
So I'm assuming that means, therefore, if they're not showing the symptoms, even if they've got the virus in their system, they'd show negative. That must be the only reason that they're having to go 2 weeks quarantine. Because if you could test someone who had the virus in their system, but they weren't showing symptoms, if they were to come back positive, then you'd know they'd had to be quarantined rather than just quarantining everyone. I'm assuming that's what it is, but maybe someone can tell me.
Yeah.
Facebook me.
Yeah. Well, there's a point that the Director General of Health, actually Brimfield, made a few weeks ago now. He said there was no real evidence to show that people who didn't have the symptoms but had COVID-19 were then passing it on. And so, but we haven't seen anything about that for a while, actually. I'll check that out. Because, yeah, I mean, if there is evidence of that, well, then that throws the whole thing out. You know, there's just, you know, then everyone has to be tested.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and I guess that's what's going to be looked at over the coming months. And if we do look at letting people through our borders, and in the meantime, I think, as you say, we need to get out and enjoy this country and enjoy the fact that we live in the most beautiful places in the world.
I think finishing that conversation perhaps about the, can't go to France, go to Whakatane, is that both, because Airbnbs are all empty at the moment, obviously. People aren't making money in their Airbnbs. What people need to now understand, both private individuals who have got things like Airbnbs and in New Zealand, is like we were talking about before with the example of the New York Times price point, is they need to find their price point. If I can fly from Dunedin to, I don't know, let's say Nelson, not saying that there's going to be an opportunity, and do the whole weekend, two nights there and flights for a couple of $100, of course I'm going to do it. It's going to support the economy. It's going to be a good experience for me. At the moment, though, if people want $200 a night for their house, and they want, it's now getting Kiwis to have that loyalty back to the country and to their fellow citizens who have got things like Airbnbs and small businesses, but also to the national carrier. And it's those small businesses and the national carrier meeting us back in the middle and making that price point so we can do it. And then, let's start visiting one another once we're able to, and I might even get out of the South Island at some stage. Nah, but maybe. Nah.
One of my last weekends before everything sort of turned to custard was actually in Dunedin. I went down. I've got a mate who plays in the band 660, Chris Mack. He plays bass guitar, and so all my family live in Christchurch. I was actually born in Dunedin, but all my family live in Christchurch, and so my brothers drove down. We got an Airbnb house out at Mount Cargill, and it was so beautiful on a farm. Slept in and went to the concert, had a great night, and so that's the last big social event I went to, and it was fantastic.
It's a pretty good check mark for a social event to go to. If that was the last one you went to, 660 at Forsyth Bar and hanging out by up Mount Cargill, gosh, can't complain about that one.
Yeah, and a fantastic band, Aussie band called Ocean Alley. If you haven't heard them yet, have a listen. They're very good.
Hey, Mike, look, I think as an essential worker, I think we've probably used up enough of your time today, but it's been really nice talking to you. And I really appreciate you giving us some time, especially to shed some more light, on sort of the behind the scenes of what's happening in that whole journalistic world, which everyone's talking on at the moment. And maybe next time you're in Dunedin when the lockdowns have up, maybe we can do a face-to-face in the studio rather than I'm in my bedroom. Do I see a pillow back there? Are you in your bedroom too?
I'm in what would normally be my daughter's bedroom. Right. So with a wonderful old map of the world behind us. Cool. And
so rather than a bedroom to bedroom,
I would love that.
Digital
thank
chat.
You so much. I've really enjoyed it.
Yeah, look, I really appreciate it, and stay safe being out there. And thank you so much for the. It's interesting. I've always laughed at Americans. Oh, thanks for your service. So they say to their things. I think that's weird. Oh, just thank you for your service. But I feel it's really the right thing to say at the moment to those people who are first and foremost in the hospitals at front line. Just please, all the QSMs this year need to go to people who are working in the medical field. No one else. I don't want to fucking see an athlete getting a Queen's Service Award this year. I want to see nurses and doctors and medical and people in the health department. They can get them all this year. But to you guys as well who are out there, and you are putting yourself at more risk than others. Because you're out and about, and that, as you've said, one of your colleagues, showed symptoms, sort of thing. So from me, and if you haven't heard it from others in the community, genuine thanks for what you're doing, because what you're doing is part of this cog that's keeping us all informed, so we know what's going on. So I do thank you for your service, and really appreciate it, and I look forward to catching up again one day soon.
Thank you, Pat. Kia ora. Thank you.